CB on the mic. World Rule Talk. Yeah. CB break it down, yeah, the host with the vision. From the classics to the new, every film get precision. Obscure reels hitting gems, yeah, we dig in the vault. Every frame get examined, every angle we talk. From the old school grain to the high def shine. Indie flicks to the hits, yeah, we cover all time. If it's cinema gold, then you know we gon' say, hit subscribe, tap in, let the critics all play. Yeah, film talk strong, never fading away. World Rule Talk forever and a day longer.
Yo, what up though? This is your boy C Dot to the B Dot coming at y'all once again with another movie review. So, we are on the third week of August, aka The Businessmen. And this week, we're going to be talking about a film that I like. Surprisingly, there's a lot of other people that don't like it. They prefer the other version of this movie than this one. But I like this one because of the linear story. You know what I'm saying? And that movie is Jobs. Now, I was supposed to do this review 2 days ago, but I got caught up in some things. So I got home late, both on Wednesday and yesterday. So I'm bringing it to you guys today. So that's my apologies for being late. So without further ado, let's get to the review. And the way we're going to do this, side note, the way we're going to do this is the way we did the other two. You know, I'm going to go over the cast and then the people that they portrayed, you know what I'm saying, on screen. And then we're going to get into the history part. You know, Hollywood versus real life. So, here we go. All right. So, of course, we got our main star of the film, Ashton Kutcher. He portrays Jobs in this movie. You know what I'm saying? And he was born February 7th, 1978. And I gotta say, he's a dead ringer for Steve Jobs. You know what I'm saying? Like, really, though. Y'all gotta agree with me on that. He do look like Jobs. You know what I'm saying? See, when Michael Fassbender played him in the movie Steve Jobs, which that movie was, the whole premise of that movie was based around the release, like the different releases of different Apple products, you know what I'm saying, throughout the years. So it was like different timelines. But Michael Fassbender didn't really look like Steve Jobs at all, you know what I'm saying? But he did a good job in the film. I'll say that. But anyway, Steve Jobs himself was born February 24th, 1955, and he passed away October 5th, 2011 in Palo Alto, California. So rest in peace to him. And then you got his best friend, you know, his confidant, one of the closest people that was close, you know, that was close to him. He's played by Josh Gad, you know what I'm saying, or Gad. He was born February 23rd, 1981. And he portrayed Steve Wozniak, a.k.a. Woz. And Steve Wozniak was born August 11th, 1950. So he was a little older than Steve, you know what I'm saying? But Wozniak, he was pretty much like the brains behind the engineering and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? Before Apple popped off, you know what I mean? And then next we got Dermot Mulroney. He portrays Mike Markula, you know what I'm saying? And he was born October 31st, 1963, while the actual guy, he was born February 11th, 1942. Now, this guy here, he had Steve Jobs back from the beginning. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all remember the scene at the beginning where the guy pulls up at the house looking for, you know what I'm saying, Apple computers? And then he met with Steve and then, you know, the rest of his crew. So this guy pretty much invested money into the company. And so he became pretty much an investor / employee. So he was one of the reasons why Apple became successful. You know what I'm saying? He really was. But what happened to him near the end of the film, It depends on how you look at it. You might think it was messed up, but then some people might think it was deserved based on how he did Steve. You know what I'm saying? But we'll get to that part. Matthew Modine. He was born March 22nd, 1959, and he portrays John Scully in the film, who was born April 6, 1939. And John Scully was actually the CEO of Apple that Jobs himself wanted to bring in. You know what I'm saying? Because at the time he was running Pepsi. And Jobs pretty much asked him straight up, do you want to sell sugar water all your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? So he went to Apple Computers. You know what I'm saying? But that was a mistake because later on, well, what we see in the film too is that they took a vote. And in fact, you know what? We're going to talk about Mike Markula right now. You know what I'm saying? The one that invested into the company. Because his part of the story, or what I was saying a few minutes ago, falls in line with John Scully. So what happens was, if y'all remember the scene near the end of the film where he came to Steve's house, like while Steve was around the fire talking to the rest of his crew or whatever, you know what I'm saying, the rest of his team, and then he shows up telling Steve that he pretty much got his back and he won't let him down, and, you know, blase, blase. But what seems like the next day is when they were in the office, you know what I'm saying, the boardroom with the board of directors, and they were taking a vote to see which one was going to get ousted. Was it Steve or was it Scully? You know what I'm saying? So the board of directors, they pretty much all voted for Scully except for Markula. You know what I'm saying? Markula. And what happened was the head of the board of directors told him that he had to make a vote. And so he voted for Scully to stay. And so I feel like it was messed up because even if he was the only one that voted for Steve, you know what I'm saying, that was supposed to be his guy. In the way that the look that Steve gave him before he left, man, it was priceless. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, he was done with him at that point. You know what I mean? J.K. Simmons, a.k.a. J. Jonah Jameson. Yo, he's a hell of an actor. You know what I mean? And he portrays Arthur Rock. So, Arthur Rock, you know what I'm saying? He was like the head of the board of directors, as I was saying a minute ago. And by the way that he was, you know, portrayed in this film by J.K. Simmons, he did not like Steve. He didn't like the way he was doing things, and he damn sure didn't like the Macintosh project. You know what I'm saying? So the thing that pissed him off more than anything is when Steve started mocking IBM in the newspapers. You know what I'm saying? And that really pissed him off. You know what I mean? So he was trying to get Markula to talk to Steve and tell him to basically stop. But he was the first one to raise his hand to oust Jobs. You know what I mean? It's crazy, but I'm not sure if that's how he was for real, because I know some of the story, but I don't know everything. I wasn't there, so I can't say whether it was or whether it wasn't. The next guy on the list is Lukas Haas. He was born April 16th, 1976. And the guy that he portrays is Daniel Kotek. I done butchered that name, I'm sure. I apologize, but he was born April 4th, 1954. So this was Steve's guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was the guy that he was, you know, going to school with. He went to college with. He went to India with. You know what I mean? And he started working with him day one at Apple Computers when Steve was still working out of his garage. And I believe they had a falling out. I'm not sure what really happened, but I think he left. I believe he left. I could be wrong, but again, I'm not well versed in the actual story. I'm just going off the movie, you know what I'm saying? Because I know sometimes, like I said, movies can be inaccurate, especially biopics like this one. You know what I mean? The next character we got, or the next guy we got, is Ron Eldard. He was born February 20th, 1965, and he portrays a guy named Rod Holt. Now, I don't have a birth date on him, but I can say that this guy was a very pivotal part of Apple in the beginning. Like, you know what I'm saying? He was like the biker type dude. And from the, from his appearance, you couldn't tell that, he knew anything about computers based on the leather jacket, the motorcycles, and the cigarette smoking and all that. You know what I mean? But this guy was a genius. You know what I mean? Like, he was one of the, like I said, he was one of the pivotal guys of Apple in the beginning. The next guy on our list, Eddie Hassel. And he portrays Chris Espinosa. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Some of you may not agree with me, but yo, does this dude not look like Bill Gates? I swear to God, he looks like a young Bill Gates. If they ever did a biopic on Bill Gates, which they probably did, I don't know. I never heard of, never seen it or nothing. But if they did one on him, I swear to God, like this dude right here, or if they did one in the past, or would have done one in the past, that guy should have played him. You know what I'm saying? Because if I wasn't paying attention to the movie, like if I was like on my phone or doing something else and just looked up and seen him on screen, I would have thought that dude was supposed to be Bill Gates. I swear to God, he looks like him. But he portrays Chris Espinosa. Now, Eddie Hassel was born July 16th, 1990, and Chris Espinosa was born September 18th, 1961. Now, he was another guy that was with Steve from day one. You know what I mean? When they was putting together the first Apple computer. So, yeah, he was there from the beginning. You know what I mean? Now, again, the real life story, I don't know if he was actually there in the beginning. He probably was, but I'm going off the movie. So, like I said, I'm keeping it real. I'm going to have to do a lot more research on this actual story with these characters, with these people. But the next guy, Nelson Franklin, he was born July 2nd, 1985, and he portrays Bill Atkinson, who was born March 17th, 1951. Now, in the beginning, this was the guy in the scene where, when Steve Jobs was having that meeting with his team, and then he was trying to tell them about the fonts and the menu screens and all of that, the pull down menu and all that. And there was a guy on his team that kept telling Steve what couldn't be done. And then Steve fired his ass. No hesitation. You know what I'm saying? And Bill Atkinson basically told Steve, well, you just got rid of our, best programmer. But Steve didn't care because that guy did not see the vision that he could. You know what I'm saying? So he was one of those guys that, okay, you might be a genius. You might be the best in history, the best of what you do. But if you don't see, or if you're not trying to see what I'm seeing, then I don't need you on the team. You know what I mean? That's the way he thought. For real. All right, so the next guy is Giles Matthew. Don't have a birth date on him, but he was born in England. And he portrays Jonathan Ivy. You know what I'm saying? Jonathan Ive. And he was born February 27th, 1967. So this guy, he came to Apple later. You know what I'm saying? When they started working on the iMacs and all that, like the ones you saw in schools in the late 90s. Y'all remember those iMacs, the colorful ones, the blues, the pinks, the greens, the orange, or whatever. We started getting those in middle school back in 1998. So yeah, that's where I remember those from. Now he was the guy when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and Steve basically told him that he wants him to be honest with him. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of what's going on, regardless, just be honest. And so the guy, you know what I'm saying, Jonathan, he looked down at the design and he said something wasn't quite right about the iMac. So instead of having the speakers externally, you know, Jobs suggested that he should put the speakers, like build the speakers into the iMac, which was pretty damn smart. All right, next we got James Woods, one of the familiar faces. You know what I'm saying, that everybody knows. He was born April 18th, 1947, and he portrays John Jack Dudman. You know what I'm saying? And this was Jobs' professor, you know what I'm saying, when he was in college. And he basically told, you know what I'm saying, well, he was trying to, you know, keep Steve on the right path. Because this was around the time where, according to the film, where, you know what I'm saying, he was in like his hippie phase and all of that. But he was born in April 23rd, 1920. And he passed away July 23rd, 2008. Yeah, he was around for a minute. You know what I mean? Rest in peace to him, though. All right, y'all. So this is where we get into the history part. You know what I'm saying? Real life versus fiction. And so the first part of the article asked the question, was Steve Jobs adopted? And the answer is yes. He was born to Joanne Shibul and Syrian immigrant Abdul Fattah John Jindali. I done messed these names up. But was put up for adoption when Joanne's extremely religious dying father threatened to disown her. The couple required that the adoptive parents be college graduates, and such an adoption was arranged. But on the day he was born, the couple decided they wanted a girl instead. He ended up being given to Paul and Clara Jobs, who did not meet the only criteria Joanne and John had given, so they delayed the adoption. They were counting on her father dying soon, in which case they could be married and keep their son. But they eventually gave in. They added the stipulation for Paul and Clara that an account was to be created for Stephen's college education, and so it was. His biological parents were married a year later and had a daughter named Mona. They divorced only after a few years of marriage. In addition to his biological sister, Mona, he also has an adopted sister named Patty. While he loved his parents, he did develop his own views on adoption. Chris-Ann Brennan, the mother of his daughter Lisa. Now, I'm going to stop right here for a second. So, surprisingly, they do cover the fact that in the movie, you know, Steve disowned his kid Lisa. And so, but later on, you know what I'm saying, he started to embrace her and they had a, you know, a good relationship. But the thing is, when he came out with the Apple Lisa, he denied that that product was named after his daughter. But then later on, he admitted it that it was named after her. You know what I'm saying? But let's continue. The mother of his daughter, Lisa, noted that he said he was fine with abortion, but never pushed for it. He strongly discouraged me putting the child up for adoption. Many close to him speculate that his striving to succeed is rooted in the feeling of abandonment from childhood, but Jobs disagrees. Did the real Steve Jobs have a history of drug use? Yes, the Jobs movie, True Story, reveals that he started using marijuana when he was 15 years old and began using LSD by his senior year in Homestead High School. Steve doesn't try to hide it, claiming taking LSD was a profound experience, one of the most important things in my life. LSD shows you that there's another side to the coin and you can't remember it when it wears off. But you know, it reinforced my sense of what was important, creating things instead of making money, putting things back into the stream of history and of human consciousness as much as I could. Like in the movie Jobs, he was tripping on acid with girlfriend Chris Ann when all of a sudden the wheat field was playing Bach. I do slightly remember that scene. I might be doing something else though, but I remember that scene just a tad. Why did Steve drop out of Reed College? There are a few reasons he attributes to his decision. For one, he disagreed with the strict course guidelines given. He wanted to only take classes that were of interest to him. Secondly, he had no idea what direction he wanted to take in life, and he felt like he was wasting his parents' hard-earned money on nothing. Ultimately, he decided to drop out and trust that it will all work out okay. Was Jack Dudman, James Woods' character, really okay with him auditing classes after dropping out? Yes. Researching in the Jobs True Story, we learned that Jack Dudman, the dean of students. Okay, so I was wrong. He wasn't a professor. Dang. He was a dean at Reed College in Portland. All right. So I was wrong about that part in the beginning. Oregon permitted Steve Jobs to audit classes and stay in dorms after dropping out 6 months into his education. Jack was impressed. He had a very inquiring mind that was enormously attractive. He refused to accept automatically received truths, and he wanted to examine everything himself. He spent an additional 18 months dropping in. Okay. Was Steve Jobs a fruitarian? Yes, at one point he was. He always followed strict diets which varied at different times in his life. He went through phases of being a fruitarian, a vegan, a vegetarian, and he often dabbled in fasting. He believed his diets would prevent body odor, so he rarely showered. His assumption was incorrect and was a problem for various companies he worked for, including Atari and Apple. Yeah, that scene in the movie where he was working for Atari and he was walking around with no shoes on, you know what I'm saying, still kind of in the hippie phase. Yeah, man. And I did hear that though. Like, if you eat nothing but fruit, it will create a body odor. You know what I'm saying? I never did that. I never tried it. I tried being a fruitarian for 1 month. I couldn't do it, man. It's hard. But yeah, man. Apparently, this is true. Was he forced to work at night for Atari due to complaints from coworkers about his hygiene and attitude? Yes, after landing the job by simply walking into Atari and refusing to leave until he was hired, a number of complaints came in from his colleagues. In an effort to appease everyone, his boss, Nolan Bushnell, allowed him to work at night instead. For those who don't know, Nolan Bushnell is a co-founder of Atari. You know what I'm saying? But after he sold the company, he started Chuck E. Cheese. You know what I mean? So I feel like, Chuck E. Cheese was great back in the day. Side note. You know what I'm saying? Now, I know we're grown, but we still have kids, but it's not what it used to be. You know what I mean? But I guess that's just me, in my era. But nah, Chuck E. Cheese isn't as good as I remember. But anyway, moving on. Did Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs build the video game Breakout for Atari? Yes. In 1975, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari Inc., envisioned a single-player Pong game, and he asked Steve Jobs to design it. That game became known as Breakout. Unlike what is shown in the Jobs movie, Bushnell counted on the fact that Steve Jobs would recruit Steve Wozniak to help him design the game, knowing full well that Wozniak was the better engineer. I looked at it as a 2-for-1 thing, recalls Bushnell. So, okay, in the movie, after Jobs had Wozniak come through to work on the game, it was suggested that, it was implied that Bushnell didn't know anything about Wozniak working on the game. He paid Steve for, for the, basically for the, what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. Well, basically for the modification, you know what I'm saying? And so in real life, apparently he knew that Wozniak was working on this chip or whatever for the game, the motherboard. But moving on, did Steve lie to Woz about how much money Atari paid him for the game? It depends on who you ask. According to Walter Isaacson's book, Steve Jobs, the game had a base pay plus a bonus based on the number of chips saved. The claim is that Stephen Wozniak was only paid half of the base and wasn't even aware of the bonus that was awarded because of his ability to save 5 chips. Jobs says, I gave him half the money I ever got. That's how I've always been with Woz. Wozniak recollects, I remember the details of this one. The 350 check, former Atari boss Nolan Bushnell confirms. I remember talking about the bonus money to Woz, and he was upset. I said, yes, there was a bonus for each chip they saved, and he just shook his head. They let it go. So basically, what happened was Steve, he got paid 5 G's. And he was supposed to give Wozniak half of it. But he only told Wozniak he got paid 700 and he gave him 350. I can't lie, that was fucked up. You know what I mean? They said when Wozniak read this in a book later, he started to cry. You know what I mean? But, I mean, anybody will feel betrayed that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, you would definitely feel betrayed. Like, I'll be pissed. I want the rest of my damn money. You know what I'm saying? But moving on. Did Steve Wozniak really create the first display connected computer? According to the real Steve Wozniak, Sunday, June 29th, 1975 was pivotal. It was the first time in history anyone had typed the character on the keyboard and seen it show up on their own computer screen right in front of them. Did Wozniak really have a dollar joke line? Yes. To his book, I Was, he created the line where callers dialed in for a joke and an answering machine would give them a polished joke for the day. Occasionally, he would answer the phone himself, which happens to be how he met his first wife, Alice Robertson. This venture lasted a few years, but caused headaches for a number of people who had similar numbers that were accidentally being dialed. He changed it several times to more foolproof phone numbers, but it never helped. Eventually, he shut it down due to cost. Was one of the possible names for the company really Enterprise Computers? Neither Woz nor Jobs has said that any Star Trek theme names, including Enterprise and Phaser Beam Computers, which is dope, by the way, I can't front, mentioned in the movie, was discussed as options for the company. However, the true story behind the movie Jobs reveals that basic names such as Matrix and Personal Computers Inc. were considered at the end. They decided to temporarily name it Apple, agreeing that if they couldn't come up with anything better prior to filling the necessary paperwork, it would stick. So in the movie, they suggested that, Steve came up with the name Apple, and that's the name that he stuck with. You know what I'm saying? Why is Apple Computers named Apple? The name Apple came from Steve Jobs. It was picked for a variety of reasons. Although it was not depicted in the movie, the true story shows that the fruitarian Jobs often frequented a 220-acre apple farm turned commune called the All-in-One Farm outside of Portland. Daniel Koch accompanied him on his visits. He had just returned from one such trip when he and Woz were deciding on a company name. He viewed Apple as simple, fun, and not intimidating, which was the opposite of how people currently view computers like in the Jobs movie. It was also noted that it would come before Atari in the phone book. An added bonus. That was smart. Wozniak did remark about the issues where the Beatles, Apple Records name, but perhaps it was for the better since they both were fans. Was Apple Computers started in the Jobs family garage? Yes. The real Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple in the garage of Steve's parents' house in Altos. Los Altos. They also commandeered the kitchen table and his sister's vacated bedroom. They recruited whoever was available to help, including Daniel Koch, his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth Holmes, and Jobs' pregnant sister Patty. Others shown in the movie, including technician Rod Holt, didn't come aboard until they began the work on Apple II. Okay, so he came later on. You know what I'm saying? Steve's father, Paul Jobs, halted his side venture of repairing old cars and gave them the whole garage. He added a long workbench, built a new plasterboard wall on which he hung a schematic of the computer, setups, rows of labeled drawers, and built them a burn box so they could test the computer boards by running them at high temperatures. Yo, he looked out for him. But sadly, his dad didn't really have too much of a role in the movie. You seen them that time where they started working in the garage, then you seen them again when Jobs came back after he got ousted from Apple. That was really it, though. You know what I'm saying? He didn't really have too much of a speaking role. Was Steve Jobs' real childhood home featured in the movie? Yes, scenes featuring the exterior of the family home were shot at Steve Jobs' former childhood home at Los Altos. Did the owner of the bike shop really expect a more complete product? Yes. Bike shop owner Paul Terrell had been expecting a more complete product, not just boards. They included no power supply, case, monitor, or keyboard. Like in the movie, Jobs convinced him to accept the order and pay. So, yeah, man, I don't know if, like, a lot of people, I didn't know how, their feelings back then, because again, I wasn't there. But, you know what I'm saying, just buying the motherboard and then putting the computer together themselves. But a lot of people probably wasn't with that. So it was probably for like a lot of computer nerds and stuff like that, or people who were savvy with tech like that. You know what I'm saying? Which I take my hat off to those people. For real. All right. What was Rod Holt's initial role at Apple? Rod was brought in to design a new power supply for the Apple II computer so that it would not overheat, eliminating the need for an internal fan. He was responsible for creating the revolutionary switching power supply, which is significantly lighter due to the fact that it did not require a transfer. Yo, I don't know why I can't read today. This is crazy. I'm an idiot. Anyway, did Jobs really refuse to give founders stock to Daniel Koch when Apple computers went public? Yes. Although he could have been awarded founders stock, Jobs and the board decided not to allow it. He says that since Koch was not high enough in the company and not salary, that he did not meet the criteria to receive options. He was not the only worker to get shortchanged in the deal. Steve Wozniak took it upon himself to create what he fondly refers to as the Woz plan. He allowed employees to buy 2,000 shares a piece at $5 a share, which 40 employees did. In addition to this, he remained loyal to those jilted by Jobs. He gave shares to Dan Koch, Chris Espinosa, Randy Wigginton, and Bill Fernandez because of their pivotal roles in the first stages of Apple. The company went public December 12, 1980. That was fair. That was definitely fair. Did the real Steve Jobs sign for visitation rights of Lisa Nicole Brennan Jobs? Yes, but still had himself convinced that he wasn't the father despite the paternity test, saying that there was a 94.41% chance that he was. In addition to being ordered to pay child support, he had to pay back welfare payments to San Mateo County that Chrisanne Brennan had filed for instead for trying to sue Steve from the start. He was allowed to see Lisa, but opted not for a while. Damn, I'm reading too fast. Their relationship was tumultuous and sporadic, but she did not. But she did choose to live with him and the new family he had with wife Lorraine Powell. Lorraine Powell during her 4 years at Palo Alto High School. Lorraine Powell. All right. Was the Apple Lisa computer named after his daughter? Yes. During our investigation in the Jobs movie, True Story, we discovered that this is true. However, he only admitted it years later. The acronym Local Integrated Systems Architecture was used to explain the name before he fully acknowledged that she was in fact his daughter. So I said this in the beginning. Was an ad taken out to taunt IBM? Yes, in August of 1981, a few weeks after IBM's release of their first personal computer, Apple placed a full-page advertisement in Wall Street Journal saying, "Welcome IBM, seriously." Damn. I can't even lie. For some reason, that's hilarious, man. This guy had some balls, yo. Was the overpricing of the Macintosh the reason for the loss in sales? Steve believes that it was the blame. Steve believed that it was and blamed CEO John Scully for the failure. It's the main reason the Macintosh sales slowed and Microsoft got to dominate the market, insists Jobs. Scully and Jobs had debated the price, and at the end, Scully won, pricing it $500 more than expected. In order to cover upgrades and marketing costs, the price was a whopping $2,495, and it is believed to have alienated the average user client base for which they were striving. Why did Steve Wozniak quit? In February of 1981, Woz was in a plane crash that caused him to develop amnesia. At this point, I didn't know that. That's crazy. At this point, he took some time away from Apple. Once his mind cleared, he decided to finish college at the University of California, Berkeley, under the name Rocky Raccoon Clark. Upon returning to work, he found that he had lost his drive for it and was busy with other interests. As a part of the Apple II team, Wozniak felt underappreciated and realized that he preferred a smaller, tight-knit company atmosphere. When the idea of the university remote control came to him, when the idea of the universal remote control came to him, reading too damn fast, he decided to leave and start a new company called CL9, short for Cloud9, which was already taken. Unlike what is seen in the movie, he did not go to Steve to let him know about this decision. He went to his Apple II division engineering boss and informed him. Jobs found out through a piece in the Wall Street Journal. Wozniak insists that he did not leave because he was mad at Apple, but simply because he had a new interest, the remote. Jobs appears to have held a grudge for a time and even disrupted the remote's manufacturing process by stopping the company associated with Apple from designing the casing for the remote. When did Steve Jobs come back to Apple? On December 20th, 1996, it was announced that Jobs would come back as a part-time advisor, which he did in January of 1997. CEO Gil Amelio resigned that July, and on September 16th, 1997, Steve Jobs became the ICEO, short for interim CEO. Did Jobs really dump 1.5 million shares of Apple stock? Yes, the real Steve Jobs had received shares as well as cash for the purchase of the company next. A stipulation required that he holds the shares for at least 6 months and was to inform the company if he was selling them. He didn't. He dropped his 1.5 million shares without informing CEO Gil Amelio and proceeded to lie to him about when asked directly. Gil only found out after the SEC filing revealed that Jobs was the seller. Jobs claimed that he thought the company was headed down and wanted out, but he was too embarrassed to admit it. Later, he claimed that he didn't think that he needed to tell him. Some believe that this was all a part of his plan to become CEO of Apple by making Gil look incapable. Soon after, Gil was removed and Steve was offered the position. Damn. That's crazy, yo. What jobs did what job did Jonathan Ive have at Apple Computers? All right. Johnny Ive was the head of the design team when Steve returned. The pair collaborated on the iMac, and his simplistic design work can be seen on all new products. You can thank him for choosing the iconic pure white color of the iPod and headphones we see everywhere today. Did Steve ever meet his biological parents? After his mom died and he got the okay from his dad, he found his biological sister Mona and his mother Joanne Simpson. They all developed a good relationship over the years, but he refused to meet his father who had abandoned him. When Mona was 5, keep in mind that he had abandoned his own daughter Lisa and was trying to mend their relationship. It seems Steve believed that his father should have done the same for the child he abandoned as well. Through his sister, he learned that he had coincidentally already met his father at the restaurant he had frequented. His father later discovered online that Steve was his son, but respected Jobs' wish for him not to have contact. So we're about done here. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we're pretty much done. The rest of it is just like, you know what I'm saying, other information and all that, like speeches and stuff like that. But I will say on a scale of 1 to 10, this movie, the accuracy of this movie for me will probably be somewhere between a 6 and 7. There's a lot that they left out because, I mean, it's a movie, a biopic, so you can't fit everything into a movie. Now, if it was like a miniseries or something like that, then I'm pretty sure they would have told a lot more. But I mean, I feel like the movie, it was good for what it was. It was pretty decent to be 2 hours and 8 minutes. You know what I mean? The acting was pretty good. Everybody who portrayed any of these people did a great job. You know what I'm saying? Again, as far as Ashton Kutcher playing Jobs, it's like I feel like he exaggerated him a little bit. Again, I wasn't there, but there was a lot of people saying that Steve Jobs was a bona fide asshole. You know what I'm saying? But he got the job done. No pun intended. So, I don't know, but there was a lot of great products that came out of Apple. Even though I'm not an Apple guy as far as like phones and things like that, but I can respect the company for the strive it took, you know what I'm saying, to bring out these products. So again, if you haven't seen this movie, make sure you go check it out. You know what I'm saying? I got it on DVD, but if you can't find it on streaming, you know what I'm saying, I'm not going to tell you to go that route, but I mean, it's worth the watch. You know what I mean? The 2015 movie, I've only seen that once, and I thought it was pretty decent. But again, I prefer the 2013 version. So that's pretty much my review for Jobs. And we will be back next week. We're going to be talking about The Pursuit of Happiness. So stay tuned for that, and I will talk to y'all later. All right? Peace.